Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Our guest tonight is the Honorable Nelson Rockefeller, Governor of the state of New York. Governor Rockefeller was born in Bar Harbor, Maine, the son of a respected philanthropist and the grandson of the founder of the Rockefeller fortune, John D. Rockefeller. Governor Rockefeller is a graduate of Dartmouth, a Phi Beta Kappa, and was reared with typical Rockefeller restraint. As a college student, he was never given much spending money. On campus, he was one of the boys, sporting a crew cut, corduroy trousers, and a green sweater. His life has been sprinkled with excitement. He became the head of the Rockefeller Center and has served in important posts under both the Democratic and Republican administrations. In 1958, he took the plunge into politics, bucked a Democratic trend to score a resounding, surprising victory to become governor of New York, amassing over 3 million votes, the largest number of votes ever recorded, a winning governor of the state of New York, and also winning by a margin of over 573,000 votes. Immediately, he catapulted into national prominence, and today, by millions and pollsters alike, is strongly favored to be the Republican nominee for president in 1964. We shall hear from Governor Nelson Rockefeller right after this message. Governor, welcome to our show On the Spot. Are you a candidate for re-election as governor of New York?
I certainly am.
Whom do you think will be your opponent?
Well, I really don't know. There's a lot of talk, even though it's 4 months before the delegates are elected to the convention, but the mayor of New York, who campaigned to rid the city or rid the Democratic Party of bosses, seems to have taken over the boss position himself, and he now seems to be picking the candidates 4 months before his delegates to his own convention are elected.
You wouldn't care to speculate as to names who are being considered?
Well, he's talked about some specific names, but as far as I'm concerned, whoever they pick's all right with me. It's going to be an aggressive, positive campaign based on the record and on the program for the future that will be built on the action been taken the last 4 years.
Are you as confident of winning by the same margin as you did 4 years ago?
No, I don't believe in that kind of confidence in politics. I think it's a good thing to run hard and to win, and whether I win by 1 vote or 500,000 or a million, as long as I win, that's what I'm after.
1 vote or 1 run, it's all the same. Governor, I presume you saw the latest Gallup poll, which shows you leading all potential Republican candidates for president with 33% of the vote, with Senator Barry Goldwater trailing you at 23%. Any comment on that poll?
Well, first, I honestly didn't see it, and secondly, I'm looking at 62, not 64.
Well, the poll was official. It was published just the other day. Now, you brought up 64, and you say you're looking at 62 and not 64. Any comment on about whether or not you'll be a candidate for president in 64?
No, I really have no plans beyond 62, but I do have a sense of responsibility as a Republican to participate in Republican activities around the country. We invite distinguished Republicans, governors from other states and others, to come to New York, various parts of the state, to participate in rallies. They've been very generous with their time. It adds to our rallies and the interest and the excitement of the party. And I feel I have a responsibility to do the same in going on around the country.
Well, what do you think is going to happen in the 62 elections? Which party is going to win?
Well, as far as New York State's concerned, I think we're going to have a Republican sweep. It's one of the most Republican states anyhow. We have all but 1 statewide office. Both houses of the legislature are Republican-controlled, and both senators are Republicans. We want to strengthen that leadership, and we feel that we're entitled to it on the basis of the record.
Well, do you think that the Republicans will win the majority of seats in the 62 congressional elections?
You mean nationwide?
Nationwide, all over the country.
My feeling is there's a real chance that they can, and I think there's going to be a tremendous increase. I think we're going to increase the strength of our delegation from New York very substantially.
Governor, if you were to rate the Kennedy administration to date as being excellent, good, fair, or poor, how would you rate it?
Well, I'd break it down this way. I would say that as far as objectives are concerned and a statement of purpose, I'd rate as good. As far as delivering on carrying out in legislation and in action the objectives, then I think the record is not good.
What do you attribute as the principal reasons for the Nixon Lodge defeat in 1960?
Well, these postmortems, I don't think really prove a great deal. They unfortunately didn't win. Now, you can take and slice it any way you want. They didn't get enough votes to get elected.
You don't have any concrete reasons or speculation why they didn't win. Do you support the resumption of nuclear tests as far as the United States is concerned?
I most certainly do. I have been advocating it for a long period of time. I think we have to face in this country the fact that the reason we have been able to preserve the freedom and integrity of this country and freedom in other parts of the world is basically the fact that though we are numerically outnumbered in military terms, we have had superiority in nuclear weapons. And this has been the basic strategy of our government. And I think that we have got to recognize that. That is the basic military strategy, is built around nuclear weapons. I think we've got to recognize that. I think we've got to preserve our supremacy, that if we should ever lose it, then I think we would be in a most serious position as far as the future security of freedom is concerned.
What did you think of the President's action in the steel strike?
Well, I thought the whole situation was unfortunate.
If you were calling the shots in foreign policy, how would you handle or treat Cuba?
Well, you got to say at what point. I mean, these things are not something you can just slice in all of a sudden and then give the answer at one point. Foreign policy doesn't develop that way. It's something that develops over a period. I think that having a communist regime in Cuba in the Western Hemisphere is completely counter to the entire Monroe Doctrine and the philosophy that lies back of it, which has been a historic policy of the United States, that we would not permit an alien power from another part of the world to come in and get control in this hemisphere. In my personal belief and very serious concern that this is a real threat to the freedom and security of other Latin American countries, and that unless this cancerous growth is eliminated in the Western Hemisphere, it's going to spell very serious trouble for those countries and for the United States and for Western Hemisphere unity.
Well, how can we restore democracy to Cuba?
Well, this is the responsibility of those in charge of foreign policy. I think that there are various means that can be used in a combination.
What are some means that you'd recommend?
Well, I honestly don't know what the administration is doing. See, I can't tell what their policies are that are behind the scenes. But I think that whatever means are necessary to restore freedom and democracy and preserve the integrity of the Western Hemisphere must ultimately be employed.
Do you favor the proposed Kennedy Medicare bill?
No, I don't. I favor the approach of a contributory health insurance approach on a national basis. But I feel very strongly that contributory health insurance for senior citizens should be handled on the basis where there's an option for the individual who reaches the age of 65, that if they have their own health insurance policy through Blue Cross or private health insurance concern, that gives them protection that's equal to or better than that which they would receive under the Social Security insurance, that they would then be entitled to take cash instead of health protection. Now, with that cash, they could then pay the premiums on their own policy for the rest of their life. This would give the freedom of choice, which is so fundamental in this country. I feel also that the Kennedy bill is lacking in that it does not provide a trust fund for the monies that will be collected from the working populace who are under Social Security, who will be paying a percentage of their salary. There ought to be a trust fund for that money to go in separate from the other Social Security funds. This is not provided. Thirdly, the bill is lacking in that there are 17 million senior citizens today, people over 65. Only 14 million of those are covered by Social Security. So if a plan is worked out under Social Security, 3 million would not get protection. Now, I've been working with Congressman Lindsay, who has presented a bill, been introduced, which would carry out the program I've just been talking about, plus make provision for the states, in cooperation with the federal government on a matching basis, to contribute to the trust fund for medical care for senior citizens under Social Security, an amount sufficient to bring in the citizens in their state who are not now covered.
What do you think will be the final action by Congress in this year of 1962 Will they vote on the Kennedy bill? Will they include some of your remedies, or do you think the bill won't come out of committee at all this year?
Well, what I hope will happen is that it'll be amended to include features in the Lindsay bill or in the Javits bill, which has some of these features in the Senate, and that it will then give senior citizens an option for private health insurance and set up a trust fund and make provision to cover those who are not now or under the Kennedy bill blanketed in and given protection. With those three amendments, I think it's a very sound approach.
Governor, the reports of your Harvard lecture state you've committed yourself to the political union of the Atlantic community. Are those reports correct?
No, not exactly, to tell you the truth. What I talked about there was that individual nations today do not have the capacity within their own borders to either defend their own security and sovereignty, nor to meet the economic and social needs and aspirations of their people. That they have got to depend on other nations. And that we, through economic aid and through military agreements, have tried to strengthen the economic and social forces, the security forces of the free world. But that just as our forefathers felt that we had to join together as the 13 colonies, I think that free nations are going to have to develop some political structure which will bind them together politically and create a stable framework of political organization that will make possible the achievement of the security and economic and social advance which are desired within a framework of freedom. So that I have advocated that we explore the possibility among free nations of forming some form of federal structure. The communist world offers a form of world organization. The free world has no form of world organization for free nations, and I think that needs to be developed if we hope to preserve freedom and develop economic and social strength.
Governor, we'll continue with this discussion right after this message. Governor, returning back to your comments a moment ago about an Atlantic community, do you believe that the United States itself is powerful enough to defend its freedom with its own borders without any help from anyone, if the situation ever came to that point?
No, I think that's the reason we've established an alliance with the NATO countries in Europe and the CETO countries in Asia and the Rio Pact in the Western Hemisphere, because we need to be able to defend freedom wherever freedom exists, rather than try and do it in a Fortress America concept, which would be limited to our own borders, which today, with modern intercontinental missiles, is virtually an impossibility.
Well, is progress being made to satisfy you in that direction, based upon what you would like to see done?
Well, I don't feel that we can have lasting alliances purely on the basis of military agreements. I think that we need to go further than this if we're going to achieve for free people everywhere and for ultimately the world as a whole, the kind of world and the kind of life we believe in, which involves respect for human dignity and equal opportunity for all, and the whole concept of the private enterprise system functioning with individual initiative. This can only work in some kind of progress through order. And this order does not exist today because we don't have a political structure. And I don't limit it to an Atlantic Union. I think that free nations anywhere. We started with 13 states along the Atlantic seaboard in the United States, but now Alaska's come in, Hawaii's come in. There's tremendous space separation there, but there's no reason why nations in different parts of the world can't come together in some free nations I'm talking about, in some form of federal structure. It's a very exciting structure where the individual nation gave up, as it did the colonies, as they did, a portion of their sovereignty to the central government, but retained the basic sovereignty. And the states in this country have retained their basic sovereignty, which is a tremendous strength and ensures that dictatorship cannot arise and that we preserve democracy.
Governor, do you think the United States should have attempted to raise the Berlin Wall as soon as it was being constructed?
Well, these questions looking backwards. My feeling is that it would have been very convenient had we anticipated this might have happened and had a plan to prevent it, because this is a very unfortunate thing that they can now seal off the people in East Germany, East Berlin and East Germany and East Europe, who were using this as an escape route, which was a constant open door to the West. And I think it was a very powerful force for undermining the strength of the communist world, and for showing to the people of the communist world that they could go and look at the West and see what was happening there, see what free people could do, and the contrast between the two.
Governor, as you know, this country is becoming a country of party labels: conservative, liberal, extreme left, extreme right, extremist, and so forth. You have a comment to make on this trend of labeling people and labeling parties and labeling issues.
Well, personally, I think it's very unfortunate, because I think it has no real bearing to the problems we face. Our problems today are complex in all phases of life, and you don't find a chemist in a laboratory who's trying to find a solution to some problem saying, I'm going to find a liberal solution to a chemical problem, or nor do you find a businessman who's trying to get into a new market somewhere saying, I'm going to find a liberal or a conservative solution to this business problem. It's just like saying, don't confuse me with the facts, my mind's already made up. I think that what we want to do is have certain basic principles, fundamental principles we believe in, and then those principles need to be applied in the analysis on an empirical basis of the problem, and then in the solution is built around the basic principles, but the solution to the problem is found, not a liberal or a conservative solution.
Governor, why do you think that we're having so much discussion and so much attachment of public press to men in office as either being liberal or conservative or extreme right or extreme left? Why this trend in the last few years?
Well, I think, number one, it's convenient for the writers. They want to describe a fella with a shorthand.
Well, does that describe him?
Well, I don't think myself. I think it's completely misleading. But I think it's a convenient way of doing it, and then they become identified in that way, and erroneously so. When somebody talks about the Democratic Party being the liberal party of the two, to me it's perfectly absurd. I think that you take, well, Governor Faubus is hardly what you describe as a liberal. Certainly the actions of the Congress, which are controlled 2-to-1 by the Democrats, don't reflect what Kennedy says are his liberal views. He's not getting the action to carry out his program in the Congress, and yet it's the Democratic Party. I don't see how he can disassociate himself from those in his own party who don't seem to agree with him and agree with the Democratic platform, which was passed at the last Democratic convention.
But, Governor, aren't those terms more or less just semantic words? Can't a candidate at one time or another in his 2 or 4 years in office be both conservative, liberal, maybe even extreme left and extreme right, depending upon what legislation he's confronted with, what his action is at the moment, and then a writer can interpret it as so-and-so.
Yeah, but again, I don't see how you can use it as a criteria, because I don't see these words have any meaning. What does it mean? For instance, we have increased in New York state aid to education, that is primary and secondary public education, from $580 million a year in 4 years to over $1 billion a year. Well, now, is that liberal or is it conservative? I don't know. It's in the interest of the children of our state, who are entitled in this country, as one of our basic beliefs, to the best possible education. We balanced the budget in our state. It was a tremendous deficit, and we've balanced the budget. We're on a pay-as-you-go basis. We've reduced debt. Well, is that liberal or is it conservative? I don't know, but I think it's sound, and I think it makes for the growth of confidence in the community, and therefore the investment of more money, and therefore more jobs. I don't think you can say these are liberal or conservative.
Well, if it's necessary, you might just call it essential.
Exactly. It's in the interest of the people. It's essential.
Governor, what is your relationship with former President Eisenhower?
It was very friendly, very cordial. I worked for him in 3 different jobs during his term as president.
As we talk here tonight, speaking on the domestic scene of this country, what 1 or 2 problems concern you the most overall?
Domestic?
Domestic.
Well, I think that employment is probably the most fundamental problem, or at least one of them. I think equal opportunity for all Americans, sometimes described as civil rights, is a very, very
how would you elaborate upon this last statement? You say all Americans. Whom do you mean? And
well, I mean everybody that lives in this country.
Right. Now, well, what's bothering you in that regard?
What's bothering me? Because in many areas of the country there's discrimination on the basis of race, religion, color, or creed. And I think this is anti to all the fundamental beliefs that we have as a people. It's counter to our whole Judeo-Christian philosophy. It's counter to the basic philosophy of the brotherhood of man under the fatherhood of God, which is the basic belief of the founding fathers of this country.
Well, to be more specific, and everything you say is true, no one would argue or contradict you, which part of the country do you feel is most vulnerable now or needs the most correction?
Well, I don't think we can point fingers. I think we all got to look in our own hearts first and then look in our own communities. And I'm talking about equal opportunity in employment, equal opportunity in business, equal opportunity in education, in housing, all across the board. Well,
do you think civil rights in this country have been advanced or at a standstill or declining?
Well, I think they're advancing, but I think they need to advance more rapidly. With both parties had excellent platforms this last convention in this subject, and were committed to taking steps, at executive and at legislative, to eliminate, to major steps, eliminate in all fields discrimination. And the President has not only during his campaign, but since taken very strong stand in this field. And yet, when it comes to action, there's been virtually nothing done in the Congress. He didn't support the Clark-Seller bill, which was a bill which would have embodied all the principles of the Democratic platform. And he hasn't even, as a matter of fact, eliminated discrimination in federally subsidized housing, which he talked about all through the campaign, through a stroke of the pen. He could eliminate this discrimination.
Governor, our time is running out. We only have about a minute and a half left. How do you view the Cold War at this moment? Can you tell us in a minute and a half?
Well, I think it's not good. I think it's serious. I think that the basic conflict that exists in the world between those of us who believe in freedom of the individual and those who believe in the individual as a tool of government is visible everywhere, and that we have got to be on the initiative more, that free men have got to be not only aware of the infiltration of communist forces, but have got to have a positive approach to this, so that people everywhere in the world feel that freedom is the wave of the future, that democracy is the destiny of the future, and that they feel that through these channels that they are going to find their best hope for opportunity.
We have about 50 seconds left. Any advice to a young man seeking to enter politics?
Well, to get into a political organization of his choice and work and start ringing doorbells and becoming familiar with the issues and the candidates and taking part in the most vital force that is going to keep live all of the fundamental things that we have believed in America. And this is through political organization, and every American should be a part of it.
Thank you very much, Governor Nelson Rockefeller, for coming here for this interview. We deeply appreciate it, and I'm sure our viewers enjoyed your comments and your reactions very much. Good luck to you in all of your endeavors. I'll be back after this message.
Nice to be with you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Governor. Our guest tonight, Nelson Rockefeller, the very popular governor of the state of New York, who's being talked of as the most likely choice to lead the Republicans in the presidential election in 1964. Next week, another interesting guest, same time, same station. In the meanwhile, thanks for watching and thanks for listening. Good night.